And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, the secret oaths, and the secret proceedings.
The show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions.
What the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Welcome back to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. These are Conspiracy Queries, and I'm Alan Park, at the risk of being redundant, which is something I always do. Be redundant. Well, we have a great show today. I have a guest live on the phone from Denmark, a place I've never been but would like to go. I'd like to go to Denmark. Just put your hand up in the air if you've been to Denmark. Okay, and then the rest of you that would like to go to Denmark, put your hands up. All right, and why don't you introduce yourselves to each other? I bet you have a lot in common, you Denmark fans. The person from Denmark I'll be speaking with is Tommy Hansen, and Tommy is a reporter. Do you remember what reporters are? Reporters are people that chase down the story, and that doesn't always happen anymore. Now it's just report the story. But I'm talking about an investigative journalist. There are a lot of investigative journalists out there, maybe as many as, I don't know, half a dozen around the world, investigative journalists. So Tommy is definitely one of them. And he used to work in the press, and I'll let him tell you about it. But he used to work in the press in Denmark, and a couple of years into the 9/11 situation, he started to ask questions about it, asking why people don't ask questions. He was asking questions about why certain aspects of 9/11 were not being covered, and then he found that he was getting less and less work. So he will tell you about that. I'd like to discuss Operation Mockingbird, first of all. And I don't know if it's springtime where you are, where you're listening to this, but the mockingbirds are now out. Operation Mockingbird, and I'm pulling this now from the very trustworthy source of Wikipedia I'll be referencing. But I have also spent some time with Operation Mockingbird, and we will be spending future shows focusing almost entirely on Operation Mockingbird and similar operations. If you don't know what Operation Mockingbird is, other than a lovely-sounding name, it was a secret Central Intelligence Agency campaign. See, right there, you can't even trust Wikipedia because it says it was a secret campaign. I have reason to believe that not only is it a campaign, that it lasts to this day and is even more pervasive and powerful than when it first started. And we'll get to that later. It is a campaign to influence media, and it began in the 50s, the 1950s, organized by Cord Meyer and Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles, you may recall, had lots to do with the Kennedy assassination inquiry known as the joke book for idiots. No, that's not what it's called. It was called the Warren Commission Report. Allen Dulles was involved in that. You could do an entire show on the Dulles brothers. Anyhow, Allen Dulles was involved in Operation Mockingbird. So that part of the was is true, because Allen Dulles is no longer with us. I don't know how upset I am about that. Let me just check. Not very much. Okay. It was later led by Frank Wisner after Dulles became head of the CIA. and the organization recruited leading American journalists into a network to help present the CIA's views. So that was a plan they had. And if you read anything official like Wikipedia, which is often attended to by mockingbird-type people, it no longer exists. You got to be kidding me if you believe that there's no more official influence on the journalistic storylines that pervade our lifestyles and cause us to believe and disbelieve certain stories, kind of like in the Boston bombings, which are ongoing. Admittedly, we don't have all of the answers yet, other than the hundreds of hours of videotape that show the gentleman, Jokar, I believe his name is, still in custody, leaving the scene after the bomb went off with his backpack on. Not the blown-up backpack that was on the ground that matches the description and photographs of these other gentlemen working, as I mentioned on the previous episode, at keeping an eye on things with their tan boots and their tan pants and their backpacks with the white square on the top. That was one that was blown up. And you see that guy running away, clearly without a backpack. But don't spend any time on that. Just look at these two photographs, said the FBI, and don't spend any more time on it than that. Just these two, that's all you need to know, and move it on from there. But this is more about the press than operations of a tactical nature on the ground. Anyhow, Operation Mockingbird, after Allen Dulles became the head of the CIA, recruited the leading American journalists into a network to help present CIA views and funded some student and cultural organizations and magazines as fronts. What it doesn't say in the opening paragraph is which magazines, but you've all heard of them. As it developed, it also worked to influence foreign media and political campaigns, in addition to activities by other operating units of the CIA. I love how this is all casually put in the past. This is what used to happen a long time ago. They're not still doing this. No. It said, in addition to earlier exposés of CIA activities in foreign affairs, in 1966, Ramparts magazine, a CIA-funded front, published an article revealing that the National Student Association was funded by the CIA. Congress investigated, publishing a report in 1976. Well, they got right on it. And other accounts were published. The media operation was first called Operating Mockingbird in Deborah Davis's 1979 book, Catherine the Great, Katharine Graham and the Washington Post Empire. Katharine Graham, no longer with us, also hugely influential in seeding, and when I say seeding, I mean S-E-E-D-I-N, seeding thought into the minds of the populace. Because so many people read it in a magazine, they would automatically believe it to be true. Also, to some degree on television, would automatically be true to so many people because they couldn't imagine that anyone would print bold lies in there and use that to sort of manipulate the public consciousness into doing what you're told, because there's no better way to get someone to do what you want them to do than to trick them into it, to make them think that that's what they want, rather than forcing them into it. There's an old saying, the easiest prisoner to keep is, this is a paraphrase obviously, the easiest kept prisoner is one that doesn't know he's imprisoned. Anyhow, the rest of the Wikipedia page, thanks for your help on that. I'm going to find some more prescient and accurate information when I spend more time specifically with Operation Mockingbird and talking with some journalists and some publications. Well, I won't be actually talking with the publications because most of them are digital now, and you just can't, there's no talking to digital things. What I mean to say is people working inside of digital publications that used to be magazines that aren't magazines anymore. We're getting rid of magazines now. The information's coming too fast and furious to spend it with magazines, but that did influence people for years. And but at the end of this report on Wikipedia, this entry on Operation Mockingbird, the entire thing is put in the past perspective as though that weren't happening anymore, which is amazing to me. If anyone really thinks that that kind of stuff isn't still going on, I don't know what you're on about. Now I would like to preface the interview that I'm going to have with Tommy with some testimony before the 9/11 Commission. This is going to be Lee Hamilton of the 9/11 Commission speaking with the transportation minister at the time, Norman Mineta, who oddly enough no longer is a politician but works at the firm of Hill and Knowlton, which is a PR firm, oddly enough. Hill and Knowlton had their pants down when the first Gulf War, the 1991 Gulf War, started, when a little girl came in crying. This Kuwaiti girl had come into this testimonial situation and explained to Congress in a hearing that the Iraqi soldiers had come in and torn the babies of Kuwait out of their incubators in a Kuwaiti hospital, throwing them on the floor and making off with the incubators. It was all later shown to be fiction. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. None of this ever happened, and it was another lie. And there was evidence earlier on that it was put up by Hill and Knowlton, the PR firm, and the press didn't really bite on that. They didn't really get on that at all, because that would have thrown up a lot of opposition into going into that particular war. And war is good for business. You can't not have war, right, fellas? So you need a press that will keep people thinking, much as what's going on right now. We don't really need to go into Iran. We don't really need to have a war with those people. We don't really need Israel attacking Syria because Syria is friendly with Iran, and if they provoke Syria enough, that Syria and Iran, who have a friendship, will provoke Iran into retaliating, at which point then the United States will pile on and help Israel deal with Iran. I mean, could it be any more transparent? The things that have gone on recently, the attacks that Israel has laid down on Syria, and if you do any kind of research at all, the photographs of the death and destruction of innocent children in their wake is jaw-dropping. On one hand, jaw-dropping. On the other hand, not so surprising at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This testimony now I'm going to play to you is Norman Mineta before the 9/11 Commission discussing Dick Cheney and his involvement on the day. So here we go.
I wanted to focus just a moment on the Presidential Emergency Operating Center.
Just a moment? That's all you want to
You were there for a good part of the day. I think you were there with the Vice President. And we had that order given, I think it was by the President, that authorized the shooting down of commercial aircraft that were suspected to be controlled by terrorists. Mm-hmm. Were you there when that order was given?
No, I was not. I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
That's Norman Mineta, the transportation minister who was there at the time, testifying that Cheney was allowing a plane to set its sights on the Pentagon. Now, keep in mind at this point, Towers 1 and 2 had already been flown into by Many say airplanes. Some say no airplanes, missiles. I don't know what happened there. But those two buildings were hit and attacked at some point, regardless of what side of the coin you're on. So the questioning goes on from there.
Well, at the time, I didn't know what all that meant. And
the flight you're referring to is the
flight that came into the Pentagon.
Pentagon, yeah.
And so I was not aware that discussion had already taken place. And but in listening to the conversation between the young man and the vice president, then at the time I didn't really recognize the significance of that. And then later I heard of the fact that the airplanes had been scrambled from Langley to come up to D.C., but those planes were still about 10 minutes away. And so then at the time we heard about the airplane that went into Pennsylvania, then I thought, oh my God, did we shoot it down?
Well, I guess we'll never know, because Dick Cheney has always maintained that he always did the right thing. He's recently been the subject of a Showtime, I believe it's Showtime documentary, that he would do exactly the same thing all over again if he had the chance. The fact that the attack on 9/11 was not exactly, as we have later come to learn on several accounts, the fact that they then decided to go to war with Iraq because 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia were able to attack an American institution known as the Pentagon and the financial centers without any kind of air cover, all the while a drill was running with almost exactly the same parameters on exactly the same day. Is this conceivable to anyone? Really? I find it extremely hard to believe. I don't fully have my mind made up about it, but the more I spend time researching it and thinking about it, the harder it is to believe that the official story is the truth. And the reason I talk about it, and some people say, oh, it's a long time ago, 9/11, just let it go, because the same nonsense, the same series of lies that were obviously told, despite what the overall picture of what happened there is it's incredible to me that the same similar tactics are now being used again to drum up more support, and they're getting it for another war on a different country, despite the fact that people like Zbigniew Brzezinski have written about this as being some kind of a game plan as far back as in his book, the Great Chessboard or something. I think it's called. You can look that up on Amazon. The Great Chessboard by Zbigniew Brzezinski. I'm not going to spell that. You'll have to say that. I can't spell Brzezinski on a dare. No, I would never be able to. But just say that into your phone, and it'll probably do a correct spell version of it, and you'll be able to get his book, The Grand Chessboard, where they lay this out. They lay out the plan. Similarly laid out in the PNAC agreement, the PNAC agreement. Have a look at that while you're researching, and I'll put all this up on the website. But yeah, there's Dick Cheney saying he would do it all over again given the chance. If he thought. Now, I don't understand how a guy can say something like that. I made a lot of mistakes. There wasn't really any need to go into Iraq. We changed our reasons on it constantly, as every time we had an official version, it would crumble away from even nominal press investigations. But I'd do it all over again. What kind of an idiot? I mean, I think that he must have a nuclear pacemaker to keep what some people call his heart constantly moving. I don't understand it. Well, I'm going to throw this now to my guest today, Tommy. He is standing by on the phone, And this is going to be a long interview. We've got lots to talk about. So before we get started, I will tell you it's going to end with a bit of a tease, because we're going to pick it up right where we leave off at the end of this episode. And sit back and enjoy Tommy's Danish accent. Of course, if you're Danish, it won't sound like he's got an accent at all. I hope we have some people listening in Denmark. And if you do, please leave a message at con_queries on Twitter, or go to the website www.conspiracyqueries.com. And I just want to say it's great to be here at Sirius XM Radio. They're helping get the word out, so I want to thank everybody here that's involved and making the transition a smooth one. Actually, the transition wasn't smooth. The previous episode, you'll hear some pretty poor sound quality in the front and back end of the episode. But hey, that's one for the archives. So let me just set Tommy up here, and we'll bring him on. If you spend any time on the internet, I know I do. Raise your hands. All of you listening, good. Okay, so you're honest. There are a lot of good documentaries out there. I love documentaries. There are some crummy ones, some boring ones, some cut and paste YouTube ones, various different types. I came across one last week, and I don't know how it happened, because you skip around from one link to the other. And I came across a very powerful documentary about 9/11. It's a Danish documentary, a Danish filmmaker, and you need to see it. You need to pull up a browser right now and punch this in. It's called Sensible Doubt. And I will have the link for Sensible Doubt. By the time you hear this, it's already posted on conspiracyqueries.com. It features an architect, an MP in the Danish parliamentary system, and a professor of scientific note, and an airline captain and pilot trainer. That's one guy, an airline captain who eventually became a pilot trainer. And it also features my guest today, journalist Tommy Hansen. Now, that's the journalist Tommy Hansen, not Tommy Hansen, the baseball player, or Tommy Hansen, the gay porn actor. Now, that's okay, Tommy. I have the same problem. I am the Canadian comic Alan Park, not the Scottish plastic surgeon Alan Park, or the Korean mathematician Alan Park, and I am certainly not the stainless steel, triple-bladed, retractable anal speculum Alan Park, which is available for 49 euros over the internet. Wouldn't it be ironic if the gay porn actor Tommy Hansen owns his own Alan Park anal speculum? Well, we won't bother to answer that question unless I have him on the show. Right now, I have from Denmark. Thank you for joining us. Here he is, Tommy Hansen. Tommy, are you there?
I'm here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. What have you been doing lately?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been doing a Google image search on my name, because when I do so, my what is the Polish colleague pops up. So I'll stick to just Googling on normal basis, so to speak.
Okay, good. All right, Tommy, now you are a journalist, and you are what I like to call an old-timey journalist, where you actually go after the story instead of regurgitating whatever the government or official source tells you to say. And maybe you can talk to me a little bit about what you think are the principles of journalism. What is your journalistic credo?
Well, it shouldn't be any surprise for any real journalist. It's the global issue. I mean, journalism is there to exploit, to explore the undoings of the wrongdoings of the governments, of the establishments, of the everybody in power. And if they stop doing that, they are no longer journalists; they are merely public relations workers. And I mean, I've been doing research on a lot of issues for many years, and it took me a lot of years after 9/11 to really realize that there are issues where you are not allowed to be a critical journalist.
Okay, leaving 9/11 aside, because we will get to it. I mean, that's how I came across you. What are some of these other avenues of investigation that you're saying are not a good idea for the journalist to go down if he wants to keep his job?
You could take. I could give you a lot of examples, but almost every time the state or a major corporation is involved in some kind of a environment problem or environment disaster or anything like that, you'll see the system always reacts in the same way by making a very, very large report by a very tiny commission appointed politically, and everybody just reads. I mean, nobody reads the report. The press only reads the conclusion of the report, and based on this non evidence, the media gives you only the official version of every case.
Now, has that always been the case as far as you've known? Have they always delivered the fake goods?
Well, some maybe since the Roman Empire as well. It has always been the case. The history is full of journalists who has been stepping out of the box and saying something's definitely wrong, and I get a lot of joy seeing other journalists from all over the world exposing all kinds of stuff that should be exposed by the mainstream media. That's exactly what you're doing, Alan. And I mean, there are hundreds, thousands of us out there. So this is for me. I'm just doing what I've been doing all the years. Years ago, I could publish some articles in on some cases that where the Danish state has made some I would say fraud, but I was the only one doing it, and when nobody no one else in the press joins the case, joins this cause, and says we have to look into this, then nobody knows.
Right. Now, tell us, Tommy, let's talk 9/11. Now, 9/11, was it a misunderstanding or a practical joke?
Yeah, the practical joke, well, I mean, everybody has heard the Steve Corbett's version of the official 9/11 explanation, and it's really an amazing conspiracy theory that these 19 Muslims should have made all this mess. But
19 Saudi Muslims.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what happened to you on 9/11? Take us through your day in, you were gainfully employed at that time, I take it, as a journalist somewhere, and tell us about how you made the connection from, basically picking up the pieces of what you had, what you were spoon-fed, and then realizing, wait a minute, I think there's something more to this.
Yeah, well, it took a couple of years before I actually woke up, because I saw it like everybody else, and at that time I couldn't even imagine the thought that part of a government part of a civilized government, so to speak, could stage this event. I would never ever in my wildest dreams believe it.
And so, what led you to come to believing it?
The fact that one day I met, the fact that it was just a coincidence. One day I knew an airline captain, Nils Dustrup, who is also in the movie that you mentioned in the documentary, and he lent me a book by Thierry Mason called Pentagate.
Oh, right, the French author.
Right.
Yes.
And that just changed everything, because if this one part of the whole event on that day is so corrupted, then the whole thing must be staged by someone else than the alleged hijackers.
Now, that book, what was it? I have not read the book. Was it a personal account, or is it an investigation? What that Terry Myson? I'm obviously pronouncing it wrong, but
yeah, me probably too. But no, you don't even have to read the book to raise a question. You only have to look at the front page. The front page photo is the so-called keyhole, the exit hole in the third inner ring of the Pentagon. And this hole was allegedly caused by the official explanation said it was the nose of the 757. Then they said it was the landing gear. Then they said it was something from the brakes. And I don't even know if they found a fourth explanation, but whatever.
It's odd to have a cleanly punched hole in a wall by an engine or the brakes or what have you, and then no trace of the engine or the brakes.
Right. I mean, you don't even have to be 10 years old to know that. And very, very quickly, it turned out that on every major event on 9/11, there have been use of explosives far beyond what the official explanation can contain. So I mean, the damage that happened to Pentagon it didn't look very much like a Boeing 757 made of aluminum and steel and what's it called? Some plastic types. I don't remember the English word.
Well, that's the food they serve on board. But yeah,
right, yeah. But I went on a TV debate with a Danish journalist a couple of years ago, and he told me how it was very logical that such a soft airplane, such a soft material airplane, could penetrate a concrete wall. It was merely because of the speed, because it was very, very high speed. He said.
Uh-huh.
So I asked him. How many soft cakes did you need then? I mean, just send them 1,000 miles an hour, so it will blow anything through anything. But it's all this stuff is so incredible when we look at the fact that people died. People were killed in not only Pentagon but all over the place on 9/11. No investigation has ever been on any of the subjects. No, what's it called? Crash commission in Danish has ever accessed any of these wreckage.
Okay, so now as a journalist, how do you personally authenticate visual evidence? Like if you're looking at a photograph that's about an incident, how do you say to yourself, has this been doctored? Has this not been doctored?
Yeah, that's why. Well, that's almost impossible. But relating to 9/11, I always rely on the official NIST Neue photos from the many published photos from that day.
Yeah, the National Institute of Science and Technology, for those who are wondering what NIST means. I think that's the wording for it.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the female photographers, federal, what's that called? Federal Emergency Management.
FEMA, right?
Yeah. Kurt Sonnenfeld took lots of photos from World Trade Center.
Are they still looking for him? Do you know Kurt?
Yeah. He's wanted for murder, which he said he didn't commit, and he's in Argentina as far as
he's still there, huh? Okay. Yeah. Now, about visual photographic evidence that is sometimes altered. I don't know if you saw in I'm sure you did, in Denmark, the Baghdad Square, when the Americans supposedly conquered Baghdad Square and took down the statue of Saddam Hussein, and then it came out within days in the mainstream press that the the gathering of people by the thousands that were supposedly there were just reproductions over and over and over again of the same, 27 guys, and they just mapped them all over the place to make it look like a huge crowd.
Yeah, but that's really a major problem today, because what most people don't realize is that the big media, the really big media, at least in the United States, I would not like to think that it also occurs in little Denmark, but who knows? But the very big mainstream media, they use actors. They use crisis actors. There are acting companies specialized in delivering what they call hyper realistic training situations. They use actors in cooperation with the. I have to correct myself. It's not the media exactly that uses these actors. It's typically, and it's always, every time you look at it, it's some CIA, some FBI, some sort of government agency that has hired some actors to do something in a drill that then suddenly turns out being a real life experience.
Now, it's funny you bring that up, or timely that you bring that up, because we are just going through a wave of supposed revelations of crisis actors in both the Sandy Hook shooting that took place in the United States back in December. And that, of course, is being poo-pooed by everyone who is holding up the official story. I have not come to a personal conclusion on the phenomenon of crisis actors, but we're hearing it again with the disaster that took place in the Boston Marathon, where some people were injured. There was a gentleman in a wheelchair with his legs blown off purportedly by this bombing situation, and I heard he was a crisis actor, but I don't know that he was. But what I do know is, how does one have their limbs blown off and then picked up, plopped into a wheelchair, and pushed around? I mean, the human body only contains 5 or 6 liters of blood. How long would it be before this guy died? I mean, there's some serious veins and arteries in your legs that I just don't understand how he could be alive at that point. And it turns out he's also the one that was able to identify the 2 suspects that they've been chasing and killing and injuring, and however that's been going on.
Right.
So what is your source? And this is building to a question. What, not that you can reveal a source, but please share with us, if you can, what is this information base of crisis actors that you could lend a validity to that notion?
Well, I couldn't point out an exact link on the internet, but I have seen some of the presentations from the companies, these so-called crisis actors companies, and there's no doubt that they are there, and there is also no doubt at all that they are officially used, and you could say that that's in a good cause, but they are officially used by the CIA and the different agencies in terror drills and in disaster drills. And they are doing it to add a very, very realistic nerve to the drills. And that's why they're doing it. And that's okay somehow. But what is disturbing, at least, is that very often in the last 10 years, 15 years, we have seen such drills being carried out on exactly the same day that some terror event happened.
Yeah, I can't get my head around that. That is over and over again. I mean, I don't, I say this to my friends, I'm not good at math, but I can't calculate the odds of that happening once, never mind the amount of times it's been happening.
That can't be. I mean, 9/11, London 7/7, the terror event in Oslo, Norway. You've heard about that?
Yes, of course, Breivik, and as well going back to Oklahoma, 1995.
Bombing, yeah. But I mean, and you can go back and back and back and back. But I mean, even in Oslo, that's the tricky part to to swallow, so to speak. That is that in Oslo we had the same situation. The Norwegian terror squad had a drill on exactly the same day that it happened. The drill contained two elements. One, that a bomb would be one of several bombs would be brought to explosion in the central Oslo, and secondly, a madman would try to kill as many civilians as possible. That were the two items on the drill on the morning of Utøya, which then suddenly on the same day turned out to be a real life scenario. It's a fact. So the big question is, that happened in Oslo, that happened in London, that happened in New York, it happened in Oklahoma. What kind of apparatus could operate on a global scale to make sure that this could take place in Oslo as well?
Oh, I thought you were going to come in with the answer there. I love the question, but what's the answer?
The answer is obvious. There are two possibilities. If it could be a coincidence. That's
every
one.
time.
Yeah, well, it could. That's
okay.
Santa Claus could come around the corner in a moment. I don't
okay.
Say no to that. But if it's not a coincidence, then we have to say that. Then how can it be done? It could only be done if you have some sort of mechanism that reached into every Western country, so to speak. And need I remind you Kennedy warned about it, Eisenhower warned about it. The CIA was founded in 1947, and 2 years later, all budgets and employees were made secret, and they've been that ever since. There are numerous books describing the CIA as a hidden state, as a state without control. And I've read a couple of books saying that all Western intelligence agencies on the very high level act as one organism.
Well, listen, I'm speaking right now with Tommy Hansen. Tommy is a journalist from Denmark, and we're talking about the craziness that is the coincidental situation of having drills take place that almost identically mimic the then real disastrous terror occurrences that happen all around the world, not just in the United States or in Canada or anywhere else in around the world. So we're with Tommy. So Tommy, let me ask you something about your journey. I want to find out again. Don't think we've covered this. Is you were gainfully employed as an employee, and then you started to go down this 9/11 trail because it didn't sit well with you. Describe your being removed from where you were working.
Yeah, it took 2 or 3 years, I would say. I began very modest by just questioning, saying to my colleagues, something's wrong. Why don't we look at this, and why don't we go into that? But no one wanted to do anything about it, and the word conspiracy theorist came up very, very quickly. So I had two choices. I could do as my colleagues, or I could do it as a journalist should do it, and of course I chose the latter. The result was I worked as a freelance journalist during those years, and the result was that I couldn't sell any more articles to Danish media. Very period. So from one day to another, almost.
Regardless of the subject matter, you mean? You just couldn't sell anything.
Yeah. Yes, of course. So that's a way to get rid of me, so to speak. and that's the status that it has been ever since. But I feel a very remarkable difference now, just in the last 2 or 3 years. It has changed. It has really changed because there are no more arguments against what I've been preaching, and a lot of other good people have been saying for years. There are no more arguments. So all they do is when I confront one of them or get in a discussion or anything, they tell me that I also believe that Elvis still is alive or something.
Oh,
like
sure,
that.
yeah. They start to paint you into being a weirdo.
Right, and that's what I find the most disrespectful to all the people that were killed on 9/11 and to these 1.5 million people that has been killed in the following wars.
How do you process what I like to call a conundrum? I don't know if there's a Danish word for that. There is a very plausible counter argument that I hear all the time, and it is when people are discrediting the notion that there could be a conspiracy, they will say something like, you know, the government screws up all the time. They can't even operate the postal service. What gives you the notion that they could orchestrate such a huge huge event as a 9/11 or a 7/7 without having it screw up? Why you can't have it both ways?
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well. I wouldn't even say any. I would say goodbye, have a nice life, because those kind of people are you can't reach them. That's the kind of people that has been created by the media for the last 20 years with this lifestyle promoting news manipulation. That's exactly what they want us to do. They want people just to mind their own business, go to work, pay their taxes, and give it a little bit of something to some collection to the Negroes or whatever, and leave it all to the politicians. But what everybody can see today, and that's not in the respect of 9/11, but that's all in all. The political system that we live in is a fraud. It is a fraud, and we don't have any democracy because we don't have it for the simple reason that we don't have a free press to control the people in power.
Yeah, like it's hard to even ask I find what I do. I mean, this show is called Conspiracy Queries because I like to ask questions about it instead of making statements about it, because I ultimately don't know all the answers, but I'd like to find out as many as I can before I check out. But one of the simple questions to me about 9/11 that people won't even entertain the notion of it. You're crazy. You probably think Elvis is alive, like you were saying people say to you. But if it wasn't an actual military stand down with no jets approaching the errant planes on 9/11, I like to say, I'll give you the first one. I'll give you the first plane crashing into the first tower. Let's say they pulled that one off. But by the time a second plane also doesn't have a transponder operating properly, but radar can pick up that it's doing a hairpin turn and heading back to New York, where you just had a plane crash into a tower moments ago. By the time the second one goes in, by the time the third one crashes in supposedly in Shanksville, and I have a theory about that I do have a theory on, and then the other plane going into the Pentagon, like it's just inconceivable. I'll give you the first one, but what about those other 3 planes? It doesn't make any sense to me that then after that takes place, 2 buildings collapse in a way burnt buildings have never done before or since. And the Pentagon is, from what I understand, one of the most videotaped buildings on the planet, allegedly for security purposes. And there's no videotape of the collision. I mean, why not? There's a series of frames from one camera at eye level where you can barely see anything. And, there's footage all over the place, and they're not showing it, and no one seems to care. They just believe it, and I find that astounding.
That's the point. No one seems to care. But that's because no one has ever heard anything of about the questionable things about 9/11 on the mainstream news. I mean, as you said, I'll give you the first one. It's okay, but right after the first plane hit the first tower, fighter jets were scrambled from 2 air bases nearby. Right after that, they were scrambled. It was in a matter of minutes. And after that, they were directed over the Pacific. I don't remember where. But the point, the result was that they never got to do any jobs at all. If they didn't shoot down Flight 93, I don't know. But the last plane that hit Pentagon, that's quite interesting. If you look when you look at Dick Cheney's doings on exactly
on the day, right? Are you talking about the other gentleman, Norman Mineta?
Norman Mineta, yeah, right. Because if he's right, if Mineta is right, then there's no question at all that Dick Cheney stood and watched the Flight 77, if it was that, nearing Pentagon and doing nothing, the stand-down order.
Now, I also remember from researching it myself, I was in a bit of a layoff when 9/11 happened, so I had the sad luxury of being able to spend way too much time on the internet. So unlike you, I was suspicious immediately from day one. There were a couple of very odd things. I wonder if you've come across this. One was that the area of the Pentagon, the one side of the 5-sided building, had relatively recently been reinforced architecturally, and that the very same thing took place on Building 7. Architecturally, it had been revitalized. The top 8 or 10 floors or something had been overhauled and rebuilt. So it's even stronger a building, Building 7 is, than it appeared to be in the first place. And I remember seeing this information on the internet back in the day, but I haven't been able to source it since.
Well, I have to correct you a little bit on that one, but it's even worse than you describe it.
All right, that's enough. Hang up on Tommy. I won't be corrected on my own show. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, correct me by all means.
Yeah, this part of Pentagon, it was reinforced in order to withstand terror attacks, and it was the only part of Pentagon that was reinforced that way. What you talk about on Building 7 was probably what is called Major Giuliani's bunker, where some of the floors...
That's where he kept all of his dresses, right?
Yes, yeah. Some of the floors in Building 7 were reinforced and made flight-proof and storm-proof and whatever. But even worse, both the sections in both the towers, the Twin Towers, had undergone extraordinary fire protection before 9/11.
Well, that would explain the black smoke, which indicates a very low temperature of burning, but it doesn't indicate why the buildings would collapse into a pile in less than 10 seconds.
No, but I'll give you a hint, because what you do when you how do you see that, when you deploy nanothermite, you've heard about it, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you deploy nanothermite, you just paint it on just like paint. When you make an extraordinary fireproof on a steel-framed high-riser, what you do is you get into the steel core, and on the steel core you expose the steel core in order to put some new material on. That's the fire protection. So if you were conspiracy theorists, you might say, what if they didn't make fire protection, but actually painted on the nanothermite instead? What if that was the scenario? Because interesting is that nanothermite ignites at a temperature of 430 degrees, and until then it does absolutely nothing. So if you were to bring those buildings down, it would be a good idea to deploy nanothermite on the steel structure and just sit down and wait for a temperature to get higher than 430 degrees. And that was what happened when the two planes got in and the fire started. The heat from the fire would have made the nanothermite ignite. So that's a plausible scenario for the breakdown of the buildings, which obviously wasn't a collapse. And it also would explain two other things, namely...
And so I'm going to stop you right there, and you're saying, namely, the two things are, but we're going to have to wait on that because we don't have enough time. We will pick this up in part 2 of my interview with Tommy Hansen. Thanks for listening to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park on Sirius XM Channel 167, the show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions. We're trying to answer questions that matter and provide you with a perspective you won't hear in the mainstream. There's more going on out there than what we are being told. We're dropping a new show once a week every Friday on iTunes and accompanying that show on the website with the relevant contact names, YouTube links, and articles. That website is conspiracyqueries.com. On your smartphone, find Conspiracy Queries at Stitcher.com. Please offer feedback on Twitter at con_queries or at AlanComic or at our website. Thanks for listening.